Hello, good morning, everybody. Today is October 27th, 2016, Thursday, and welcome to today's webinar. This is going to be the last of our three-part series on networking. We've done webinars on setting up IP cameras from one camera to multiple cameras. This is going to wrap it up, and it's going to be good information. My name is Ken Miguel, and here with me today is Mike Lugo. Mike, how are you?
So good, Ken. Hope everybody out there is doing good.
And we have a really interesting topic here and very helpful information, right?
Yep.
On network accessories, why we need them to complete our job. Of course, IP cameras, have been really gaining ground. We have converted many analog and coax camera installers onto IP. Why? Because IP systems nowadays have become easier. There have been accessories to make, components work with each other, and really the learning curve has really eased up for somebody that's never done an IP installation. And we're going to give information here that's even going to help you further out in that regard. This webinar is brought to you by PoE Technology Group with over 20 years experience in video surveillance. We offer not only the best, the most reliable in IP video cameras, DVRs, NVRs, and CCTV accessories. Guys, if you've never used PoE's new H.265 4-megapixel IP products, you're really missing out. This stuff is already available. It's really the latest and greatest in CCTV. So check us out if you guys need more information on that stuff. Let us know. If you have questions anytime throughout this webinar, there is a questions box on your screen. Type your question in, and we're going to answer them throughout the webinar. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about network accessories. We're going to talk about where you start when you do networking for, what we hope for is going to be a successful camera installation. We're going to talk about different switches from PoE to non-PoE type. When do you need a PoE? When do you not need a non-PoE? We're going to talk about PoE injectors. We're going to talk about mid-spans, what happens when you have longer runs, what happens when you have coaxial cable at the site, how do you turn that to IP without having to rewire, things like that. So it's going to be really good. So let's go ahead and start, Mike. Let's start from the get-go. So what do you need to buy when you want to start a network
system? So it's real important to know what switches that you're going to need in order to get the system right away. A lot of people, I need a PoE switch, but nowadays a lot of the NVRs come equipped with PoE switches built in, or they're expensive. They're very expensive devices, so maybe you don't need a full 16-port, 8-port PoE switch. So this first part, let's go over a bit of these different devices and see what you need for certain jobs.
Well, let's start. What is a switch? What is the difference between a switch and a router?
So a router is going to route your connection. It's going to allow your devices to communicate with each other and not have any collisions within the network. The difference between a router and a switch is a router routes, a switch just directs traffic. And then there's layer 2 switches right above a switch and right under a router. I'll get into that in a little bit and why they're more important when it comes to your install.
So if our dealer walks into, for example, a residential installation, and they walk into the site and they have high-speed internet, what are they going to run into as far as the hardware?
So yeah, you're going to run into, of course, every internet connection has a modem. Nowadays, a lot of modems have routers built into them. In that case, you're pretty good. You'll just need a PoE. Maybe you might need a PoE switch. A lot of times you might see a modem and then a separate router, or you might see a modem / router with another router on top of it. And all these different situations can become headaches during the install. So it's important to know what it is you're dealing with before you actually start the install.
Okay. PoE types.
So there's basically two main types of PoE. So
PoE stands for Power over Ethernet.
Yes, Power over Ethernet. And the Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineers, the IEEE, came up with, I know pretty much everybody's seen 802.11, that's wireless internet. But so 802.3, there's AF and TF. Sounds a little complicated, but what that means is there are two types of PoE switches. A standard PoE switch, which is AF, is 15.4 watts of power. And you're going to need a minimum of 44 watts DC going into that to power that device. Then we have 802.3 AT. This is a PoE plus. What's the difference? This gives you more wattage, 25.5 watts of power per port.
In what cases would you need a PoE plus over a regular PoE?
So a lot, especially today in home automation, a lot of devices require more than 15 watts or 12 volts of power. So PoE plus to run your lights, to run your thermostat, things like that, you're going to need a PoE plus. So always look at the requirements on the device that you're using. 8 times out of 10, it's probably regular PoE, but as we move forward with technology, you'll start to see that more things are requiring PoE plus.
And guys, a great benefit to using IP cameras is you don't have to run a power cable and video cable. It's power over the Ethernet. If you have a PoE switch, you have one cable that will transmit your video and your power. So it's actually, in this case, easier than an analog installation. So there's one wire for everything.
Actually, yeah, it is, and it may sound crazy to some of you installers who've been doing it for a long time, but yeah, when it comes to that, it's easier. So let's take a look at some of these switches, what they might look like. As we all know, there's different brands out there. They all have their own form factor. But a standard PoE switch, 16 ports. Of course, they come in 4 and 8 as well, all the way up to 24. So it's standard. It's got each port is a PoE specific port. Then you have other PoE switches that have 8 ports, but only 4 are PoE. So only half the switch can be used as a PoE device. Then you have a full PoE or PoE plus, a PoE plus managed layer 2 switch. I mentioned that earlier. It's right under a router. It's not completely a router, and I'm going to go into detail of what exactly makes it a managed switch. And of course, you have your PoE NVRs. NVR has a PoE on it. You don't need a switch. You don't need an extra switch. That goes directly into your router, and you're ready to go.
So we're looking at a PoE NVR here, which of course we carry. Now this is the easiest, most simplest way to do an installation, right?
Yeah.
Just a home run from the camera to the NVR.
Yeah.
What are we looking at here?
Just like Ken mentioned a while ago, this basically is easier than an analog system. This is plug and play. You plug your cameras in, plug it into the router. Our new NVRs have quick connect, so you don't have to worry about port forwarding anymore.
What is quick connect?
So quick connect is our version of a P2P connection or technology we adopted, and it's going to allow for you to connect directly to your device, whether it be NVR, DVR, through your mobile device, to your computer, via a QR code or device ID, and eliminates the whole need for IP addresses to be configured and things like that. So it makes everything just easier.
So it's auto port forwarding.
Auto port forwarding. Yeah.
If you guys are still port forwarding your NVRs and DVRs, you got to get off of that. Get off of this new auto port forwarding recorders.
Yep. And so, as you can take a look at this NVR, it's got the 16 ports for the cameras, and it has one LAN port that goes to your router. So there's no need for any other extra devices or extra equipment to be purchased. Next, let's go into a 8-port, 4-port PoE. Total of 8 ports. The first 4 ports are the PoE, so you have 4 cameras, and then those other 4 ports you can use for a computer, for your router, whatever. You have 4 extra ports to connect whatever you need to on your network. Pretty simple. Now we come to a standard PoE switch. Now, as you can see, there's 16 ports. You have 16 camera system. What's the problem? You have no uplink port or no extra port to connect your router. So what is that? You're left with either buying another switch or having to sacrifice one plug to connect to the network. And now what? You have to buy another switch or find another way to get that last camera connected to the network. Run into a bunch of issues like this. So that brings upon the, well, it's a 16 port PoE, but it's a 20 port switch managed layer 2. And what makes it different, it has uplink ports. So important, especially in cameras, because normally you're going to go to 16 channel system, you're going to fill all those ports, you're going to need some way to connect to the network.
So always have that extra port so you can connect your switch to the internet.
Yep. And not only that, so what makes it the layer 2 more important, like I said, so it's right under a router. You can log into the actual switch and make configuration changes. You can't do that with the regular normal PoE switch. It's just pretty much almost like a hub. You plug it in and that's it. This allows you to do many configuration changes, and that's a whole webinar in itself, so I won't get too deep into it, but it also has account support that allows you to log in via terminal. So these are pretty a little more expensive, but in the long run, it's going to help you out with the install. I mentioned the uplink ports that can go directly to your router. You know, and the other ones go directly to the cameras. Now there's a couple other ports on there. Just 2 uplink ports. One to your network. You can plug your computer directly into it, not have to go through the network. You can go directly to the switch. And this is going to help you with faster communications between the network and your switch. Also, like I said, directly to the computer. But what is also important is it has a fiber uplink. I don't know if any of you guys are too familiar with fiber. Fiber is going to be the new.
Optics?
Yep. It's going to be the new Ethernet pretty soon. Everything's going fiber. I had a customer yesterday that actually had the Google fiber, which was pretty cool. It's the first time I had seen that. Yeah, fiber is going to be everywhere.
So if the customer has a fiber infrastructure already laid out, you can use that for your cameras?
Yeah.
Is that what you're
Yeah, and I'm gonna get into how to actually do that. But the importance of fiber is the speed and the distance. A regular Ethernet plug, you're gonna max out at a gig. This also goes a gig, but you can go way further, 1,000 meters rather than just 100 meters. So this distance is a major thing with fiber.
I got a question here. So if I'm buying a switch for a CCTV IP camera installation, are there different speeds the switches are capable of? And
yes.
What do I need to buy?
Yes, there is. So typically a camera, 10 Mbps, that's what you're going to use on a camera, but you don't want to buy a 10 Mbps switch. You want to go with the full 100, or if you can, if it's within the budget, get a gig. Yep. I mean, it's always, who doesn't want to be faster?
Another question here, Mike. Is it necessary to buy a managed PoE switch?
It's not necessary, but it is to your benefit. It all depends on the install. If you got a 5-camera system, you're not going to go with a full 16-port managed switch. I mean, you can get by with it. It all depends on the install. More complex networks. Normally, if they have firewalls and stuff like that, you're going to want to go with the managed switch. It's more efficient. Bigger installs, managed switch, always.
Okay.
But getting back to the fiber, so how does it connect? It's got an interface called a GBIC. That's a gigabyte interface converter. What does that mean? It's going to convert digital into an electronic signal, optical signal. light, basically. Without this device, you're not going to be able to use that fiber. And I bring that up only because if you wanted to use fiber to connect your camera doesn't have a interface for it. So they have media converters. The media converter is going to allow you to connect that fiber directly to your camera via this converter and a patch cord. So that's pretty impressive. You have a long run that's really, really long, fiber is the way to go. With the converter, you have it made. You have to worry about anything else, no mid-span or device in the middle to extend that run.
Now, Mike, you're more familiar with fiber, anything fiber. So what am I looking for if I'm dealing with fiber? If I'm an integrator and I walk into a job site, there's fiber laden. What am I looking for?
It's a good question. So the times you want to use fiber is, of course, if it's a large install. You're going to want to run fiber backbone throughout the whole thing. Another reason you might need fiber is a lot of cameras. You have a lot of cameras. You're going to need that speed. As you all know, IP is a little more. It requires a little more bandwidth than that of an analog system. And the more cameras you have, the more bandwidth it's going to require. And a backbone using fiber, you're not really going to have to worry about any type of speed issues. But there are different types of fiber. Multi-mode, single mode, that's a whole another webinar in itself as well. But it's all color-coded. So get familiar with your fiber. Know before you install and buy equipment what you're going to need. Is it multi-mode? Is it single mode? Diameter, things of that nature. So
it's good to know that I can use an existing fiber infrastructure for my CC, as long as I buy equipment with uplinks on them. And if I use that media converter, I can actually take this fiber and plug it to the RJ45 jack of my IP camera.
Correct. Correct.
Another question here: how do you justify the fiber expense to the customer?
It's a good question. In my experience, if the customer is going to spend money on a large IP system, I don't really think that explaining to them what the fiber is for, meaning speed and distance, they wouldn't have a problem going with fiber because it's just a better way of doing things.
Well, we have a suggestion from Antonio. We recommend using a 10 gig multi-mode fiber aqua color.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, thanks for that, Antonio. Okay, so that covers fiber. Let's go to a question. There are a lot of integrators that we're used to installing analogs and either upgrading that to IP or adding IP cameras to an analog system. But the question that we run into is, how can I use the old analog system to my advantage if the Coax is already ran through the site?
Good question. So technology is progressing, and now there's a lot of new devices out there that can help with this question.
Well, one answer is to rewire that whole place, right?
Yeah, and that.
I mean,
who wants to do
the
that?
customer, but
Yeah.
you can save some money.
And sometimes it's, older structures, that stuff's built into the walls, and it's hard to get the wire through. So because of
if you don't want to rewire,
if you don't want to
do we have an
rewire,
answer? Or?
yeah, we do. So in that situation, here's where you might want to buy maybe a PoE switch, or a PoE switch that only has half PoE, because there's only a couple runs that you want to use that coax through. So we have a Ethernet and power over coax.
So what am I going to do about cameras at the end of a driveway if it's over 900 feet?
So the beauty of Ethernet over coax is distance. That's one of them.
It goes further than network cable?
Further than basic Cat 5, Cat 6. You can go 1,000 feet using coax. Not only that, it's all done over one cable. You don't need to run power because the PoE And so it's Ethernet power over coax. You can run the power and the data over a coax cable. You have a transmitter and receiver. Everything's done through one cable. So it's just as good as using normal PoE, but you can go further. So it's a little better.
So how do the connections work?
It's a good question. So, like I said, there's a receiver and a sender. You have your NVR. That will be connected to a PoE switch. So it has to be PoE. It has to be a PoE switch. It's going to use the PoE switch's power to send power and data over that coax cable to the camera. Cat 5, Cat 6.
So you have one pair, right?
One
pair.
pair.
Is on the camera side, and one is on the head end side.
Yep. And I want to point something out real important is that make sure to test the coax cable first. There are requirements for these devices. If it doesn't meet the requirements, it's not going to work correctly. So 75 ohms on the cable, coax cable, is a minimum, or above. Better the cable, the longer the distance. So that's just a rule of thumb. You should keep that in mind when using these devices.
So to answer my question, if I'm upgrading my customer to IP, I can use the same coax infrastructure, and I just buy one of these Ethernet over coax converters, and I'm good to go. I don't need to rewire the place.
No rewiring, no extra power, no nothing like that.
That's very convenient. Okay. Oh, got another question for you. What if I have an 8-port PoE switch with 4 PoE ports and 4 non-PoE ports? Will I have to buy a new PoE switch for my last 2 cameras?
That's a good question. So I'm going to introduce you guys the PoE Injector. What's a PoE Injector? So we mentioned that we had a 8-port switch, but only 4 had PoE. You have 5, 6 cameras. Do I need to buy another PoE switch in order to power those last 2 cameras, which can get expensive? No. You can use an injector. An injector is going to inject PoE into the non-PoE port. So that 5th port that is not a PoE port would go plugged into this device, and this device will push the power and the data through it, giving you power at the camera and not having to purchase another switch to finish the job. So then we have what's called, well, when using a PoE injector, you're still only limited to the distance of Ethernet, right? So 300 feet, that's all you're going to get. In order for you to extend that, you would need an Ethernet extender, which is different. It might look the same, they might do the same thing, but an extender is going to extend that past the 300 feet on top of what you've already ran. So I'll get a little deeper into that. I just wanted to bring that up really quick.
Okay, this is if I'm running network cable.
Yeah.
I have to go over 300 feet. This is going to solve my...
An extender will, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so don't get that confused with an injector. Injector is just going to inject power into it. You're still only limited 300 feet. It's not an extender. Extender will extend that. And I'll get into that in a bit, but I wanted to bring that up so you guys don't get confused.
Do the injectors need power?
They do need power. They do need power. So an injector, like I said, it's going to put the data and power into the Ethernet cable. And like I said before, it's important that you guys remember that it's not going to extend the run. There's 2 pictures here. One is of a N-span PoE switch, and you can see 100 meters distance. That's it. You're limited. Next, we have a switch and a PoE injector midway through that run. Both runs are only going to get 100 meters. It is not an extender. Either way, if you have it 10 feet from the camera at the end of a 300-foot run, you're still only going to get 300 feet. So keep that in mind. And here's how it goes. So as Ken mentioned, it does take power. It's 120 volt, goes right into your wall. In the back of the injector, in the front, you'll have 2 ports. One going to the Ethernet switch, the other going to the camera. That's how it's going to get its power and its data.
Do I leave my injector on my Ethernet side or the camera side?
So it's going to go into the, it doesn't matter, actually. As long as it's within that 100-foot run,
okay, Anywhere in
Yeah,
between.
anywhere
as
in
long as
between.
It's under 100 feet.
Yeah, as long as under 300 feet.
Oh, 300.
300, yeah.
Okay, another question. I have a run for an old analog system that's still going to where I need my IP cameras. Power is not an issue. I already ran power to my analog cameras. Can I use that same power to run for my do my?
Tito, extension at 12, Tito.
Yes, so just like a EPOC, which is Ethernet power over coax, we have Ethernet over coax. So what's the difference? This does not transmit power through its cable, but it does convert the Ethernet to coax. And I mentioned earlier, it's really important that you look at the specifications on the device. Be sure to follow them specifically to a T, because straying away from them will cause the device not to work or not work correctly. So there's cable restrictions, there's distance. You want to make sure that you follow those instructions on the device very clearly. But when would you use these? So you can use them on a PoE switch or non-PoE switch. Doesn't matter, because you're not using power through these devices. These devices don't need to be powered, but also they do not provide power to the camera. So don't get confused. Just as a Ethernet run, you're limited 300 feet with these devices, because they're not powered. It's not a EPOC. It's just Ethernet. It's going to convert the Ethernet signal to coax. That's it. If they're smaller, of course, less expensive, real easy to use as long as you follow the instructions. Real simple devices. Got Ethernet on one side, BNC on the other. It's real easy to use. Here's a quick picture of how it's connected. So they come in pairs. One side of the camera side has one, and the switch side has one. These are different than the prior ones we talked about. These don't have a receiver and a transmitter. Doesn't matter, as long as you have one on each side, it's going to work. A little different.
And lastly, we talked about PoE Injector, Ether over coax converters. Do we have a device that combines all these functions into one device?
We do. And so that's going to be our, there's not too many places you'll find.
There's a bull light.
Yeah, you're going to find this actual device out there. So this device is a Ethernet power over coax. It's a injector, so it's going to inject power into your Ethernet cable. But on top of that, it's also an extender. What does that mean? So it's going to extend that signal way past the 300 feet if need be. How does that work? So with this device, this is going to allow you to extend a run 1,500 feet as opposed to 1,000 or 300. So 1,500 feet, that's a long run. I mean, that's almost 3/4 of a mile. This device can come in handy in long runs, big installs, long driveways, parking lots, things like that. You're probably going to need one of these devices. And you can run coax or Ethernet, like I said, or you can inject power into it. So you don't even need a switch that has full PoE on it. It's a pretty handy device. How does it connect? Pretty simple. Just like the other ones, this one does have a receive unit and a send unit, or a transmitter and receiver. Each side gets one device. They come in pairs. What this picture doesn't show is if it was a non-PoE switch and you use it as an injector, you would inject power into the device and to make it run, as this picture shows here.
So there you go, folks. There's some pretty useful accessories that we introduced here for your IP and networking installations. That wraps it up for this webinar and the network webinar series, networking. Got a couple more questions. If you guys have more questions, feel free to type it in there. It says sorry, this is about that all-in-one converter. Is it a self-sensing adapting so that you don't short out your cameras?
Yes. So self-sensing, meaning it's only going to be wattage. So you're going to get 15 watts, which is what a camera needs. It's going to give it that much wattage. So yeah, I guess in that sense it is. So it's not going to blow your camera out.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today's webinar. If you guys want to watch part 1 and part 2 of networking series, we went over how to connect an IP cameras, how to connect multiple IP cameras to a network. You can also watch this webinar back on our YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com, type in PoE North America, and you'll see our monthly webinars there, all of them, so you can go back and watch. Also, check us out on social media, on Facebook, PoE Technology Group North America, Twitter page. We also have several useful video clips on YouTube, like connecting your PoE DVR to your phone for mobile access. It's under a minute long. A lot of great stuff. Our next webinar series is going to be a training on PoE DVRs, our essential management software, and our mobile app. So it'll be an interesting next 3 months for a webinar series. Join us again, guys. We appreciate your time. Hopefully, you guys learned a lot about networking and networking accessories. This is, IP cameras have, are becoming more and more of, the standard for even smaller systems nowadays. So it's good to learn this stuff, and hopefully we have help in that regard.
Yeah, I recommend you guys try to join us for our next webinar. There's a lot of new features that are in the new DVRs, NVRs, and the CMS that you guys probably don't even know are there. Selling points for your customers, things like that. So
we're going to go over every menu on that DVR and what they do. Okay. All right, guys. Well, again, thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good one, guys.